The sprinklers went silent the second the sheriff cuffed our HOA president on my driveway. Her sunglasses crooked that white notice I served her, flapping against the chrome like a surrender flag that didn't know it had surrendered yet. And it all began with a $100 violation taped to my door for a wheelchair ramp. Yeah, that happened, and if you think this sounds like payback, it wasn't at first. At first, it was me just trying to get my dad into the house without dropping him. My name is Nate Walker. I build systems for a living, the kind that hum when they're right and scream when they're wrong. And last winter, I moved my dad, Hank, into my place at Blue Heron Landing outside Ridgeline, Tennessee. Stroke took half his strength and a big piece of his pride. So I spent a cold Friday night cutting lumber and countersinking screws, 1 to 12 slope rails at 34 inches, because his hands remember that height even when his memory can't sawdust in my hair. Last screw at 11 p.m. No champagne, just relief. At 6:02 a.m. the next morning came the knock, not neighborly, not curious, the kind of knock a repo man brings when he already has the keys. I opened the door, and there she was. Teresa Pike, president. Sunglasses before sunrise. Clipboard tucked in. Like a badge phone, already recording, she angled her chin at my ramp. Like you gesture at a stray dog. You plan to call animal control on. Unapproved exterior modification. Remove within 72 hours, daily fines will accrue. She peeled a neon sticker and slapped it next to the peephole. I said it's a wheelchair ramp. I emailed the drawings Friday. 4:41 a.m. Want the timestamp, but she smiled. Without moving a single muscle that matters. Medical situations don't exempt architectural control. Mr. Walker, for the record, and clicked away heels, leaving 2 neat divots in my lawn. By lunch, a certified letter landed Bylaw 5.1. 3. Facade harmony, $50 a day. Retroactive. Oh, and a warning that my gate fob might be turned off at 12:47 p.m. The reader flashed red, and I parked outside the gate, carrying groceries, like I'd been evicted from my own neighborhood that afternoon. An email to the community went out. Accessibility clarification. A carefully blurred photo of my porch under the porch light comments that sounded polite. If you didn't live in the crosshairs, rules are rules, we all have to follow them. And the thing about being the target is you can feel the temperature drop when your neighbors pass you on the sidewalk, eyes glued to absolutely nothing. You know what I mean. I tried to do it the nice way, printed the International Residential Code section, printed the FHA paragraph on reasonable modifications, printed photos of the ramp with a tape measure in frame, walked to the office at 1:40 p.m. The assistant scanned my papers like they were expired coupons and whispered, "She'll review like the president was a judge," and I should be grateful for the audience. I went home and lifted my dad's chair to the threshold because I was suddenly scared to use the ramp for optics. He squeezed my wrist once. "Thank you, I hate this. I'm trying." And that squeeze sat in my chest like a stone. I don't push well, but I audit well. So I opened the county GIS traced parcels and easements and the boring bones that make a place run. And there it was, a tiny square labeled Pump House 2, a shallow irrigation well that fed the sprinklers and lake fountain, still titled to Northwood Communities, LLC, the developer that dissolved years ago. No recorded transfer to the HOA taxes delinquent. An orphaned machine. Nobody claimed, but everybody used. I drove to Records Bouge Wall slow clock. The clerk, Marcy, rolled a banker's box and went, "Huh?" in a way that said I wasn't imagining it. 3 certified copies. Later, I had paper with teeth, then I hired Lydia Cross, the kind of lawyer who reads footnotes like love letters. She tapped a statute about abandoned utility improvements and tax certificates and said 2 words that tasted like steel. Quiet title. You're not begging a board with a clipboard crown, Nate. You're changing the ground under their feet. While Lydia filed, the HOA escalated. My trash got skipped with a zip-tied note about bin placement. A contractor in a polo measured my grass with a ruler. Like he was calibrating a rocket, a man named Brad Owens, head of neighborhood safety, knocked in a tactical vest and recited an intent to lean for 3. Refusal has consequences, pal. And I smiled the way engineers smile when they know where the master switch is, because by then, Lydia had drafted a letter offering the HOA a conditional license to keep using that pump house if they rescinded every ramp fine, adopted a plain English accommodation policy, and issued an apology for misstatements. 10 business days. I played it on speaker when Teresa called, "You can't own our water, that's community property." And Lydia said, "Read the deed attachments, or have counsel do it." Then silence, then click. They didn't just refuse, they tried a show of force. A crew showed up to remove the illegal ramp. The foreman lifted his sawzall, and I handed him the residential code. The nurse letter from April, my accommodation request. The spoliation notice about preserving gate logs, and a draft trespass complaint. With the sheriff's number already keyed. He looked from Brad's vest to my letterhead and left 2 ruts of tire dust behind, like punctuation neighbors. Watched from curtains, some kind. Some calculating Coach Boone from 3 doors down brought a drill and said, "Where do you want the post, son?" And I laughed because it felt good to hear son from a man who meant it. The deadline came. The board ignored it. So Lydia filed for an injunction on the ramp and a petition to quiet title on Pump House 2. We also notified County Water that unpermitted parties had been tinkering with a permitted utility. You could feel the gears starting to turn somewhere bigger than our clubhouse, which is the thing bullies never think about. The system that doesn't care how confidently you hold a clipboard. The morning it all flipped, the landscaping truck backed to the common green at 6:10, a chemical tote, with the label turned coy side in a gas pump and hoses unspooled like a bad idea. Teresa, in white linen, pointing with her phone. Edge everything. And if you see that ramp touch grass, flag it. I was already filming body cam. Blinking County Water Officer Reuben Park. Pulling up the moment I called a deputy 2 minutes behind him. One of the crew sloshed a 5-gallon can, and a rainbow slick traced the wet turf like a signature you couldn't erase. Teresa saw my camera and marched straight at me. "You think you can blackmail me with your little paperwork?" Jabbed a finger, gave a shove, not much, just enough to rock me back onto the thing she swore would be gone. The deputy rolled to the curb as Reuben popped the pump house lid. Found a taped-in bypass hose boosting pressure. He held my recorded notice in one hand and the hose in the other, and looked at Teresa like a man grading a math test where the student wrote 5 for 2 plus 2. "Ma'am, this is his utility. You're trespassing on a permitted system." The deputy asked me to play back 90 seconds of body cam. The shove the crew's faces. Brad remembering urgent business elsewhere, Teresa tried the sovereign citizen line, and I said no. I'm a citizen who reads code. Then the cuffs clicked. Sprinklers. Hissed, Reuben turned the master valve, and the green went quiet. The emergency board meeting that evening was shoulder to shoulder. Hot gossip full. Not civic duty. Full. Gina Patel. The vice chair sat at the center, hands tight. I didn't make a speech. I handed her a slim stack, deed and filings for the pump house parcel, my accommodation request with timestamps, April's letter, the gate fob. Log request, a still of Teresa's hand on my shoulder, and said everything I told you I would do. I did. Gina moved to rescind the fines and adopt the one-page policy in plain English. Hands went up like popcorn. 7-0. Then she moved to remove Teresa for cause. The hand that hesitated belonged to the board member, who writes the ugliest emails. She raised it anyway. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled, which is better than cheering it. Means shame. Did a little work on the way out. Here's the part people argue about, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. But I still hold title to Pump House 2. We put it in a small family trust with my mom's initials, because my dad smiled when I said that the conditional license the HOA signed includes a maintenance standard, a public budget line, and one clause that made a few folks call me a tyrant. If a resident needs a ramp, a lift, a grab bar, anything that keeps a body safe, and the board drags its feet. The valve closes until they move. Is that pressure, or is that accountability? Depends who you ask. But if I had lost, they would have told me rules are rules. And now that I won, they want a nicer word for leverage. The week before they signed the license, lawns went khaki. The fountain coughed itself to silence, one neighbor told me. His kid's soccer practice on the green got canceled because of me. And I said, because of your board. And he said, same difference. And I said, it isn't. And he posted a paragraph on Nextdoor with my name 3 times. And the phrase went too far once. You know what I mean. Then the envelope arrived. The board accepted the license, rescinded the fines, adopted the policy, and wrote the sentence. Lawyers write. When they want to say sorry without saying it. The sprinklers sputtered back, some heads late, some spitting, some pretending they'd been loyal the whole time my dad dozed on the porch with the ball game low, and said, without opening his eyes, you don't win a fight like this without making somebody mad. Pick the right somebodies. I looked at that ramp and felt the smallest click inside the feeling when a machine finally hums, the way it was meant to hum. So let me ask the part that makes this more than a tidy story. Did I go too far? Would you have kept the water off until the policy was real? Ink? Would you have rolled your father down a ramp? A board said. You weren't allowed to have, and waited quietly for permission. Tell me where you stand, and where you're watching from. Drop your city. Tell me your HOA story. What felt right? What felt wrong? What justice looks like when the clipboard crowd forgets who they work for. And if you believe accommodation shouldn't require a fight, share this, so somebody who needs it hears it.